around trauma. So I've put these two here because, interestingly, a lot of the concepts that we talk about with complex trauma are also ones we think about with sensory processing. Big among that, or among all of those, is dysregulation. If you look at complex trauma, I just listed those things that were on the previous slide. A big one for me is this behavior problems. These kids, they always say they have behavior problems. They really have trouble in groups. They have oppositional defiant disorder. They are hyperactive. What are some of the other ones? OCD, ODD, ADHD, it's the alphabet soup, isn't it?
Yeah.
But those are ones you get a lot with kids, but those all kind of code for behavior difficulties. They don't seem to get along in groups. Now, if you look at sensory processing, sure, dysregulation is one of the biggest things we see. Kids are over-responsive to sensory input. Is it a primary sensory processing problem? Who knows? But these are often kids who really respond defensively to touch, to sounds. I knew a child who went into a full-blown seizure whenever he heard a chair scrape, because in his experience, when his father's chair pushed back in the kitchen, it meant he was going to get beaten. And so this was a sound that triggered him. So he was over-responsive to any auditory input. Sensory strategies, on the other hand, can also be calming. So we're looking at what are those. We're back to the question of what do you provide kids as a proactive strategy for regulation, knowing that they can also calm. Kids have behavior problems when they have sensory processing too. You're going to see the problem is all in the eye of the person observing. Kids with sensory processing problems also have trouble with the same occupations. We were talking about social and emotional problems. Here's a difference though. With sensory processing disorders, you will often see the trigger. Sometimes it'll seem like an overreaction, because sometimes kids who have sensory sensitivities will do okay in the morning, and as the day goes on, they get shorter and shorter fuse. I call that cumulative effect. But there's always something that comes first, and then people will say, well, that was an overreaction. That was such a small thing. How could that bother you? But if you look at that cumulative effect, you can almost always find a trigger with a sensory processing problem. You might not see that with kids who have trauma disorders. It might not even register for us, but for that child, it's a huge trigger. And then, of course, the more what I would call discriminative problems, like body awareness and praxis problems for kids who have sensory processing problems. So far, so good, everybody?